Scandinavia is an ancient, beautiful region of the world filled with lore, mythology, and supernatural creatures. Most people have come to know it through the TV series Vikings or books such as American Gods. Today I will bring you four stories of the dark side of Sweden. I hope you enjoy and let's begin. Number 1. I am an au pair in Sweden and spent most of the summer weekends in my family's summer house, which is out in the archipelago outside of Stockholm. Breathtakingly beautiful place, but boonies doesn't even begin to cover it. The nearest neighbor is about a 30-minute brisk walk away, and after that there's nothing except ocean and thick, terrifying forest. This particular night was date night for the parents, so I was left with the two children alone out in the terrifying murder house. There are two houses on the property, one main house and the other is a guest house, where of course I get to sleep all alone. It's literally 2 meters from the ocean. The game plan was to go exploring in the forest, which I had never done alone with the children, only with the parents, and then walk to pick up my boyfriend from the bus stop. He would stay with us until the parents got home from their date, and then my boyfriend and I would go to sleep in the guest house. So, while in the forest, I kept getting the jitters. Things were definitely stranger, and it wasn't just because I was alone with two children. I grew up in the forest. But several times we heard the birds calling out these weird distress call noises, and a big flock would appear, a long time before we were even close enough to scare them. And there were even big thudding footsteps nearby. I was terrified of there being an asshole moose or something. We came to a little hidden lake and then things got even weirder. Through the place is unpopulated for miles. There was a woman sitting on a rock opposite of us, about 60 feet away. She was naked and wet as though she'd been swimming even though the water was much too cold for that. When she saw us, she stood up and did this weird pacing thing, like she would get close to the water and then back away, and move close again. Like she wanted to cross and come towards us, but there was the obvious lake barrier in the way. The kids were mildly worried, and it wasn't long before I ushered them back the way we'd come and made our way out of the forest. On the road to pick up my boyfriend, I had the oddest sensation of being watched. I was really terrified actually, but we met him with no incident and returned to the cabin just as the sun was setting. We gave the kids dinner, and just as they were curling up with a comic book, the main door slammed open. I really remember thinking it was a for real person. There was a heavy footfall and then bam, like someone had stomped and flung open the door. But there was no one there. My boyfriend went out and had a look around. Nothing. Must have been the wind, of course, right? It's always the wind. While we were in bed reading the story, we could hear skittering around and clawing from underneath where we were. I knew for a fact that rats and other rodents camped out at the other end of the house because there was a kitchen, but whatever. I had a really awful feeling in the pit of my stomach, but my rational boyfriend promised me it was a fox or a weasel and not to get worked up. Fast forward 3 a.m. I had a pee and my boyfriend and I were in the guest house. My bosses had come home long ago, but I'm a badass and peeing outside is no problem. So I stumbled out into the darkness and squatted down outside the guest house to pee. And it was right when I strayed in and adjusted my skirt, I got that awful feeling of dread. I had it in the forest, I had it on the way to see my boyfriend, I had it while we were camped outside in the house. I had felt just fine in the guest house with my boyfriend, but now the feeling was back. Behind the guest house is a steep hill, about a 45-degree angle, and on that hill sits what we called the ghost house. It was a house of an old soldier in the 1600s, and now it just sits there all terrifying and vacant. There's a trail going from the ghost house to the main summer home, and my boss had lit a trail with dim solar lamps. You can't see how to read by the light of the lamps, but the idea was to light your way up the hill and not to trip and die over a tree root. I could sense something moving up the trail. That means something moving from the main house to the ghost house. I squinted in the dark and saw the shape of a person, but that wasn't right because by the solar lights you can see color. Jeans, shirts, jackets, and ours all had reflectors on them, but this was just a black shadow. I thought animal, but then ruled that out because it was two legs, walking really fast and smoothly, but then it slowed and seemed to notice me. I was actually terrified, but my intuition told me to commence stare down, so I did. I was fighting to see in the dark, and just when I couldn't focus, I realized there were two very softly illuminated eyes on his face, and they were on me. It slowed down to a stroll, and I could see the eyes change tint from a bluish to a yellowish glow based on where they were in relation to the solar lamp. They were catching the light. So I stared, and it was going so slow now, this felt surreal. I could hear twigs snapping and other noises that a real life, non imagined creature makes. I remember actually thinking, this isn't a hallucination, it's fucking walking on the ground. And then the weirdest part, instead of moving at a normal, relative height the way human eyes would do, the eyes started kind of hovering. They were 6 feet off the ground, suddenly would dip down to 4 feet, then back up to five, and never left me. But the direction this thing was moving never changed, and it kept going up the hill. The eyes and the figure faded out into the darkness once the solar lamps ended, but I went right back into the guest house and locked the door. I heard nothing else that night. My boyfriend slept through everything, but early in the morning he woke me up whimpering from a nightmare. That's the only time anything has ever happened to me at the summer house, and I was there a collective month. Number 2. For skeptics, this will be hard to believe, but I can assure you that this is 100% true. So basically, I live in a small village within Sweden. And the first time I came across this ghost, or whatever it is, was when me and my friend were taking the bus from the city to our home. We don't live in the same village, so he hopped off the bus before I did. And in the bus, I get a text message to me sent on Snapchat by my friend. It was something along the lines of, "Dude, I was just walking and I could see this really tall man going towards me. When I looked at my phone and looked back up, he was fucking gone." And to be honest, I already called bullshit, so I forgot the text. I don't know, half a year? Because this happened a long time ago. And just a few weeks ago, I had the same exact experience. I had been at my friend's house, which is located about 3 kilometers away from mine. So I took the bike. On my way home, it was about 1:30 if I remember correctly. And on my way home, there's a school where I used to go to. And I remember already that I was quite scared at that point, just by biking home in the middle of the night. And when I looked up to the windows of the school, I saw what looked to be a face staring back at me. And trust me, I looked away quicker than you can imagine. I was so scared. But I took another peek, and it appeared to be an earth globe standing by the window. It just got me warmed up for what was about to happen next. So after you go by the school, there's a road and then my street. But when I came to the road, I saw a tall man walking towards me in a close distance. But I also saw headlights further back from a car. And me as a person knowing most of the people in this area, I just waited for it to get closer to see if I knew the person. And on further analysis, it was someone I didn't know. All this while the man was still walking towards me. Then it came to the point where the car had passed me with the man still in my sight. But I turned my head to follow the car for what couldn't have been more than 3 seconds, and when I looked back, the man was gone. And that really freaked me out because that shouldn't happen, especially when at that point he was about 10 meters away from me. So I believe he would be behind me if I looked, so I did, but no one. The weird thing is, I didn't think of it much at that point. Of course I did for the time being, but when I came home, it was like it didn't even happen. It wasn't until I slept that night that the real horrors began. So basically, I was lying on my stomach with my head turned to the right. And I had at that point what was, to my thought, sleep paralysis. What was weird was it had a connection to what happened earlier. So I woke up and saw my room, but my room was basically black and white, but with the tiniest tint of dark green. The room also looked quite decayed. And I remember I closed my eyes after that because I knew something was going to pop up. And believe me, it felt like I had a backpack on and someone lifted the backpack. I went up like a half a meter in the air, and I just looked to see what lifted me. And there it was, a tall man with a black raincoat and a top hat. His face was really dragged out. He had solid black eyes, and I have a slight memory that he had really light brownish hair. And after that, I just closed my eyes and prayed to God that it would let me go and that I would be able to move. Because I felt the more I tried to move, the worse the sound in my ears became. In my ears, I heard a constant blurred screaming like it was from a cassette band. And after like 1 minute, I could finally move and see. I never fell down in thin air. I just woke up laying in my bed as if it didn't happen. I rushed up to turn on the light in my room. I didn't sleep at all for the rest of the night. And it was at some point in the night while I was awake that I remember what my friend had told me he had seen. It was the same thing. Even to this day, I'm affected by it and have no other scary experience after that. The fear has stayed with me. I hardly get any sleep, and I can only sleep at day when the light is on and everyone's up. It was hell. Number 3. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly as I just want to get it off my chest. My name is Daniel, I'm 24 years old, and I live in Sweden. I live in a small town near the coast facing Norway, which is quite convenient considering my grandparents and my mother's side live over there. I used to work at a gym about 20 minutes away from my place and had been working there for around 5 years. My aunt is a part of the executives running the gym chain, so she managed to get me a full-time job when I graduated at 19, which was just perfect. I earned a decent wage and the job was actually quite peaceful most of the time, and fun at the same time. I mainly worked as a receptionist, opening the gym some days, closing others, cleaning if ever need be, even though I despise cleaning. Some nights when closing the gym is awfully quiet and people start leaving about a half an hour before closing, so sometimes I may leave earlier. I usually stayed until the full time though, because at certain points there'd be random individuals running in for cardio for about 10 minutes before we closed. So, the few times the gym was empty, I always waited until closing either way. During winter, it gets really dark in Sweden, so even if I'm closing at 8 p.m., it would look like it was midnight. I was already used to the gym, so I never felt any discomfort. It's a relatively large two-floor building, even though the second floor there isn't much there, and most everything is found on the first. The building complex also used to have a store right next to the gym, but that was closed down a couple years before I started working. At first, the gym chain wanted to extend the gym and buy up the space that used to be the store, but in the end decided it's not worth it. So the area was left empty and in return no one bought it. It was completely abandoned with a few ladders scattered in the building for whenever a worker would come in there and do some repairs for whatever reason, and also the leftover shelves and whatnot that belonged to the store. The inside for where the store was is actually quite large, and from the outside it's not possible to view the entire interior. So, as mentioned previously, some nights when closing people leave before it closes and I am left with a 10 to 30 minute window of peace and quiet. This doesn't bother me the slightest, as what I said before, I'm really comfortable with the gym and used to about every corner of it. Usually during this time, I either go off and do some cleaning or I mess around doing some small exercises for myself. Other times I bring up YouTube on the monitor in the reception and watch some videos while finishing up the last parts of cleaning in the entrance area. These are the average times. However, that is obviously not what I'm about to cover. I'm going to tell you about the one time that things started to become a little bit creepy. Not too overboard or anything, but at least catch me off guard. It was the beginning of a small series of events that would occur which would ultimately lead me to the creepiest event of my life. This was late January 2017. It was late in the afternoon and the last couple of people were finishing up. It was still about another 40 minutes until closing, but I realized this was going to be another one of the days I'd be left to myself for the last duration. It was a Tuesday, so closing hour was 10 p.m., and it was already pitch black outside. I was working at double, so I opened the gym at 7, and now I was going to close it, so it's been a long day. I had just finished cleaning up the second floor when the second to last person leaves, so I wave goodbye to him as he takes off. The last person is still doing cardio, and I assume she's about to finish any minute. I walk back down to the reception and pull up YouTube in advance, clicking into the video and waiting for it to load. A couple of minutes afterwards, the woman left as well. These people were working out late, usually just heads home immediately and decides to shower there instead. As she left, I decided to go make sure the emergency doors were locked earlier than usual so I didn't have to do it later. As I was walking towards the door leading to the old store, I noticed something was very off. The door was open very subtly. It was resting on the wall, so it wasn't noticeable in any way. I had never seen this before. The door was always closed and locked. This was very weird, as the only ones who had the keys to the emergency door were the people who worked out at the gym, security guards, or the owner of the building complex. A wave of unease and unnerve ran through my spine as I stood there, lifeless, staring down the slightly open door. I assumed the worst first, obviously thinking a robber or burglar had managed to break into the store and by some luck opened this door to escape into the gym. After a couple of seconds, I gathered my senses and decided to open the door and look inside the store. It was dark. I lit my phone flashlight and looked around. Empty shelves, unplugged refrigerators for dairy products left behind. I couldn't see to the end of the hallway as it was too long, but decided to call out in case anyone from the gym had gone in here for whatever reason. I said that if there's anybody in here, they're not allowed to be, and said that the gym is closing really soon, so they need to get back if they want to get home. I knew I wasn't going to get a response as I somehow felt there was nobody there. After a few seconds, I closed the door and locked it. I looked around the gym to see if anyone was still there, maybe some prankster or whatever. I went around a few times looking thoroughly to see if I could find anyone or anything, but everything was as it should. I thought I could hear some scratching next to the emergency exit door when I went by it one last time, almost as if someone was on the other side. I was pretty quick about it though, so I didn't pay much attention and continued. After that, all was fine. I finished up the rest of the tasks, locked the main entrance, and went home right away. Throughout the week when I worked, I made sure to check every door once in a while to see if it opened again, but to no success. Eventually, when the weekend arrived, I had forgotten all about it. The next event was about a week later when I was going to close the gym Thursday night. It was dark as usual and only 3 people remaining at the gym. It was 30 minutes before closing and all 3 of them were almost finished. I finished cleaning the second floor once again, even though there was still one person up there, and went down to finish cleaning around the entrance. After everyone had left, it was approximately 20 minutes remaining until closing. I wonder if maybe I should close early tonight and actually go home earlier than I normally do. But after reflecting over it a bit, I decided to wait. I went into the employees area to check if I had forgotten to fix anything, and as I was moving around in the employees room, I heard a big thump outside the gym. I was startled by the noise and quickly thought, crap, probably a machine that tipped over or something similar, so I jogged out to find what was up. There was no machine nor anything in the gym. It was the emergency door to the store. It stood wide open, and the noise I heard was the door hitting the wall. It had been slammed open, so I stood there, yet again lifeless, staring at the wide open door leading into complete darkness. Thoughts ran through my head like a roller coaster, and I managed to catch one of them. If worse comes to worse, I will run back into the employee's room and grab a knife from the kitchen to defend myself with. That's the thought I went with. If I saw any movement at all or heard anything, that's what I would do. I stood there for what seemed like a minute, but I'm sure it was only 10 seconds. I finally started moving, but for some reason I found myself moving towards the door. I was on autopilot. My body acted according to my instincts. I went to the door, slammed it shut, locked it, stepped back, and that's when it hit me. The door was locked last when I checked it, which was only about an hour ago. I was afraid down to the core. I ran, finished the last couple of tasks, closed, locked up, and headed home. Luckily, I wasn't going to work until Sunday, so I was covered for the weekend. Whatever that was or whatever happened, I was certain that I'm not alone in the complex at nights anymore. During the weekend, I did some research. I decided to look into the abandoned store and see if I could find anything odd or unusual about it. There was little to no information at all, just the address and the phone number to the realtor and some pictures of it before it was closed down. I decided to give the realtor a ring and see if they had any information at all, and while I was at it, ask if he or she knows who has access. Unfortunately, the realtor did not pick up. After all, it was late Friday, they were probably busy. I decided to give them a ring first thing in the morning. However, my adventure was not done yet. I decided to bike over to the complex and investigate further. It was around 8 p.m., but since it was a Friday, there was a lot of activity nearby, so I didn't feel scared going near the building. The gym closes at 8 p.m. on Fridays, so the person had just left a couple minutes before I arrived. As I arrived, I stopped at the gym and walked my bike over to the store on the other side. I stopped by the main entrance and looked inside. It was barely visible as it was pretty dark out, so I pulled up my phone flashlight once again and looked around. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary except for a forgotten jacket laying on the floor a couple meters away. I didn't think much about it and kept looking around, but to no avail. As I was just about to leave, I saw something moving in the store in the corner of my eye. It was pitch black, so it was very subtle, but I swear I saw something. I lit my flashlight again quickly and looked around. Nothing. I stood there for another minute, but there was nothing to be found. I decided to leave and call it a day, but I was going to return in the morning and look around in more daylight. The next morning, I called the realtor again, and luckily this time they picked up. I asked her about the complex and who has keys. She gave me some information about the building being so old that nobody wanted to buy it and was probably going to be demolished within the next year or two. She said the only ones with the keys are janitors, security guards, and herself. I asked if she could give me the number to the janitor, and she did. I called the janitor and he responded as well. He was pretty polite and responded to my questions with ease. He said there's probably nothing to worry about and that the building is old, there could be anything. I asked him if he had time to come over there today and check it out with me, but he said he wasn't able to. He did agree to check it out on Monday though, so he said to call him up Monday afternoon. After I spoke to him, I went back to the complex, now that it was broad daylight, so I should be able to see the majority of the store. I'm going to skip through this part because I didn't find anything of interest. There was actually not much at all to see. So Monday, around 7 p.m., about 2.5 hours till closing, I called the janitor up and he was on his way. As he arrived, I asked the person who was mainly cleaning to take over in the reception for about 5 or 10 minutes. I went with the janitor to the store. It was dark as usual, and he opened the doors to the entrance and we stepped in. It was a strange smell in there, almost as if someone had sawed through tons of wood. He turned on the lights with the light switch near the entrance and we both walked around. I went to the plank I had seen a couple days earlier and noticed that there was a hole under it. I called the janitor over and we both lifted it. The plank was really heavy, oddly heavy for a wooden plank. The hole led down beneath the building to a crawl space, basically. The janitor lit it with his flashlight and we both peeked down the hole. Even with the flashlight, we could barely see a thing, but we did notice that the space stopped at the wall, so there was no way to get in from the outside. We closed it again with the plank, went outside, looked around to see if there was any way into the store, but we found nothing. We finished off at the entrance again. He locked up and told me to call if anything else comes up, so I went back to work. Fast forward to nighttime. It was nearing closing hour and the last person had just left. I was in pretty good time as well. Only 5 minutes until closing, so I started locking up. I went to take a look at the emergency exit leading to the store. It was locked. I decided to do something stupid, which is stupid, but I'm not. I unlocked the door, opened it, peeked inside, lit up my flashlight and looked around a little bit. My heart was pounding faster and faster, but I didn't give much attention to it. I closed the door again and locked it, and just as I had closed and turned around, I heard a large bang at the door. My heart skipped a beat and I turned around facing the door in shock. Adrenaline was pumping through my body and I was frozen in place. I heard another bang and another one. It was now a continuous banging on the door that wouldn't stop. I was yelling against the door to whomever, whatever was behind it to stop. Now I started hearing screamings. The screaming is something that still haunts me to this day. It was something of which I'd never heard the likes before. It didn't sound human at all. It almost sounded like an animal. It was relatively high-pitched and terrifying. I kept yelling at it to stop, but I couldn't move. I wanted to run into the employee's room and grab a knife, but I was so terrified I was frozen. Suddenly, the banging and screaming stopped. It was quiet again. I still stood at the same place I had stood at since the banging had started and wasn't moving. I pulled up the phone and called my friend and asked him if he could pick me up. He was on his way, so I locked up and waited outside. I wasn't going to spend another second inside that gym or near that complex at all, so I moved towards the parking lot. There was a store on the other side of the road and some people moving around there, so I felt safe. My friend eventually showed up and I jumped into the car and said that I'd explain what had just happened just down the road. As we left, though, I took a last glance at the store, and honest to God, even though I don't believe in such a thing, and this is coming from someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, paranormal, supernatural, I could swear I saw someone peeking out from the window with their hands against their face. The figure was large, larger than a human being, and I got chills sent down my spine. I asked my friend to take a look, and he managed to spot it too before it suddenly took off into the store. My friend stopped, and I told him to keep going, forget about it. I wasn't going back there ever again. I still get chills when I think about this event. I still wonder what would happen if I had opened that door just slightly longer, or what would have happened if I decided to step into the store. Since that day in February, I haven't gone back. I haven't heard anything about anyone or anything since, and the janitor hasn't told me anything either. I might go and visit the place again and check it out, but for now, I'm at home enjoying my new job in the middle of the city selling coffee to strangers. The previous scary stories all come from Sweden and from the subreddit No Sleep. This will be the first of many videos on international horror content where I bring you stories from every country around the world. I hope you enjoy and I hope you keep listening.